Okay. For those, okay, just in the chat, could you guys put in whether you're using a custom framework, whether you're using ColdBox, FuseBox. In fact, if you look on the Ortis's repo where they have all their libraries and stuff, they also today added, or this week, there's some more updates for the CF Wheels framework. Yes, framework 1, I will be bringing that up shortly also. Well, Robert, the question of no framework is this. Most people argue that ColdFusion is itself a framework since it has a lot of features like application scope and so forth. So it's nothing but probably ColdFusion framework. So. Well, my name is John Farrar. Welcome to How Can ColdBox Influence Your Future Today? This talk will not be on getting a ColdBox certification. It'll be a talk on how to understand ColdBox and how ColdBox can influence your future. We're going to take a short journey into the story, the why you and I care about ColdBox. But first, we'll look at the history that brought us to this point. And then we'll see what we can do with the tool. So, anyone recognize this? Rick told me he did. I don't think he means personally, but this is ENIAC. Let me fade myself out of the way there. Technology didn't used to touch the majority of our lives. I can remember when I was young and computers were things in science fiction. They weren't things that most people had really actually ever personally seen. Well, in 1945, the first practical computer came out, and this was ENIAC. And the cost of computers that could get a job done were so high and so few people knew how to do them that they were what we call blockers. But ENIAC, in 20 hours of processing, they figured that it was doing the work it would have taken humans a combined 2,400 hours to accomplish. So this was a step forward for doing calculation style computing. How many of you have heard of Evelyn Berezin? I probably have said her name wrong, but we give a lot of credit to Bill Gates and Steve Jobs for what they've done and accomplished, but few people, very few people, seem to know who Evelyn was. In 1955, just 10 years after ENIAC arrived on the scene, the first real electric computer that was used, Evelyn took a job at the Electronic Computer Corporation as the head of the logic design department, which is pretty interesting because in that day and for many years afterwards, people didn't think about actually designing the logic of computers like we do today. And as her career advanced, she ended up in 1957, a couple of years later, going to work for the Underwood Corporation. Does anyone in the group, can you put in the chat if you know what the Underwood Corporation was known for?
Typewriters.
Yes, typewriters. In fact, I learned to type on an Underwood typewriter, so that's the biggest reason I happen to know. As Evelyn's career advanced, she moved and helped create a reservation system. And that reservation system was used by United Airlines And it had a system that was networked across 60 cities, and the reservations would update across the cities in a single second. So from there, she had another idea, and in 1968, she had left, and she started her own company because she wanted to create a word processor that would make things more practical. And that is the word processor you see in the picture there. And Evelyn, what she was really critical in doing was moving us from having the most powerful programmable calculator on the planet to actually moving computing into getting business functions accomplished. So I like to give her credit for being the pioneer who moved us that direction. Well, from the airline ticketing system and forward, we had a new use for computers, networking. And networking is what I call the technical term for collaboration. The vision of a networking system was becoming more common. In fact, the idea of a world wireless system, does anybody know who that quote is from? It was the way the concept of what we call the internet was thought of before even, well, it was around the 1900s. It was Nikola Tesla. So he had the idea for wireless internet back around 1900. So that's pretty amazing. And from there, we started creating bulletin board systems and so on until we created the internet. And along with a shrinking computer, this is one of the original terminals that they would send and receive messages on when the internet got started. Well, as the new technology drives the price down and shrinks stuff and it's easier to manufacture, well, we have meetings like we're having tonight where we can meet across the world from our homes. You don't even need to be in a fancy business office or technology center because our homes, in fact, we usually carry a cell phone around us that is a technology center. So what Evelyn saw is a need for logic systems. Coding was done when something worked. Supporting or updating any code we used to do was a horrible challenge. And it didn't function good. Evelyn was a leader because she was in charge of business logic. She saw the need to organize the logic. And part of what you will see in ColdBox is it does a couple of things. ColdBox is number one, it's opinionated, but it doesn't force its opinions on you. It gets back out of the way. As my journey into this technology started, well, I can remember when I was in the Navy using slide projectors or old film that was, you know, the projector like the ones you see in the old black and white. That's what we had for film projectors. And then when I was in reserves out of Navy, I flew to Maine and they were using GW Basic. And this is what they were recording. Does anybody know what a P3 Orion is? That was what we used to use for doing our sonar buoys that would send the sonar. They would drop a sonar buoy and check for submarines. Well, they would keep records of those. Yes, sub-hunters, absolutely. And all the records they kept from that, the programs they were writing to keep the records were written in GW Basic. And these guys were having major headaches trying to upgrade the code and solve bugs because every line, every last line in that crazy thing, all these lines over, here we go, over here, they start with a line number. And they didn't have to have every line number in there, but if you wanted to jump to a different place inside the software, what you had to do was say, go to this line number. And that's how programs worked. Now, needless to say, that created really painful systems. And way back then, I think it sounds hilarious now, but when I was on reserve duty, I showed them how to organize that into code blocks, take this number line to this number, add this type of business logic here, add your display in this section. And I created a framework for them. And the Navy, I actually have an award from the Navy for creating a framework because nobody knew about frameworks back then. So that's next slide. And then guess what? My slideshow is being naughty for me. There we go. So, Rick, did you ever go to the Frameworks conference in DC?
No, I did not.
I couldn't remember if I had asked you about that or not. The Frameworks conference is the conference that slightly preceded CF United. And back in 2007, I don't know if that was the first year. I don't think it was. I think it was second year. I went and spoke, and there were several frameworks that were presented that year. These were the frameworks presented at the conference. You know what you don't see there? Well, my framework was there, but I've moved over to Lewis's framework because I think there's more community and he has more developed features than I have, so I've abandoned mine also. But these frameworks that existed in the early days, these are the frameworks that we use today. Some people still are supporting some legacy Fusebox applications, but I haven't heard of anyone who's creating new applications with Fusebox. So basically, the irony is all of these frameworks that are being used today did not exist during the Frameworks conference. We were laying a lot of the groundwork, learning, and these frameworks were sort of like, as far as our community goes, they were second generation. When Fusebox was created, which was really the first ColdFusion framework, there were no other frameworks. So now what I'd like to do is take a short detour, and we'll get into code shortly after that. What I want to do is take a short detour because in order to understand why people use Fusebox, and has anybody seen the results so far in this year's State of the Union for ColdFusion survey? It used to be that no framework or in-house framework, those were the big people, and both of those used to lead Coldbox. This year, Coldbox actually is leading by a margin. It's not over yet, so it could lose its ground. But, and the other frameworks are, of course, the two that we showed, CF Wheels and Framework 1. Who here has ever seen the business model canvas?
I have.
Yeah, I would say I'm waiting for at least Rick to speak up. Well, in the business model canvas, can you see my pointer? No, you cannot. Now you can, right? Or not? Probably not. Okay. This value proposition, which is the center box here, that's why we buy a product. And the customer segments of the different products. So you take something like Google. Google has two customers. They have business customers that pay them to get their stuff in front of customers, and Google has people who search. They don't earn a dime from us, But as they serve us and gather all the information, that creates a business model that allows them to sell access to the other market. But to build all that software, to pull the teams together, well, you need a lot of structure. And it's not that building your own framework at work isn't structured, but if you've got, let's see, think of a good example here. Let's say, take a good example. Let's take the Google Play Store. When you have the Google Play Store, we're all writing apps that'll run on the same platform. We've heard of WordPress, same type of thing. It has extensions that run on the same platform, or themes. Well, when you have a bunch of people collaborating to use that resource, well, you can have a lot more creative workers, whatever you want to call us, contributing. And that means in a larger community, I can reap the benefit of all that work. Well, and that mix of the value proposition and the customer segments, that's what it shows on the right here. So there you can see the value proposition and customer segments bigger. Should have remembered that was in my next slide. With this, they pull those out here. Provider. So what are we? Our value proposition is a provider. So what do we do with that? We're showing the end user what are the gains, what are the pain relievers, what are our products and services. Well, I'm going to pick on Adobe for a moment here. Adobe has this product, and I'm guessing you guys have heard of it. Who's here heard of ColdFusion Builder? Probably can't, show of hands isn't going to show me. Who here has used ColdFusion Builder? No? Who here has used Visual Studio Code? I have. So here's my point. ColdFusion Builder had nice IDE features in it, but Visual Studio Code, well, what it's doing is it's offering more gains. Let me pull out of the way here. But it's offering, guess what? I have to get my flip side. It has more gains than ColdFusion Builder, and it solves more pains. So as we're doing our job and our work, well, that's why that product and service is winning for us. That's why we picked Visual Studio Code. So there's the reason I like the business model canvas is there's so many models and things that it just really helps you look and see, and I will come back to that in a moment. So when we look at ColdFusion, it has tools like command box, futures, RESTful, scheduler, a debugger called Whoops. And it's like this. Well, what we want is something that provides, you've heard the phrase pick two. We want things that are fast, we want things with a high value, and we want things, quality, few bugs. But it's hard to pick two and have that work. But as frameworks and technology advances, this is what actually happens. See, we start off getting, obviously the quality was really low. And, the value of being online used to be good. But, speed, that wasn't there. And as for those of us who've been on the internet longer, what we've seen is the picture at large is getting better and better. So now we want to move to demo time because I want to show you. What I'm saying is Coldbox reminds me of when I used to go to Lowe's and I would watch them. Here's this one machine that by configuring it differently, it's a table saw, it was a lathe, a drill press, it was a disc sander, it did boring, routing, and you could get extra tools beyond that. Well, in a large way, that's what we have with Coldbox, and CommandBox is one of those tools. So let me see if I can swap screens here for you. Okay. So here's the code screen. I will go ahead and close these. We're not. And you may use another editor. I'm pretty sure Rick. There we go.
Hey John, we're still seeing your slides.
Oh, are you? Thank you. There we go.
All right, now we can see your screen.
And what is the code tool that you're using, Nick?
I actually use IntelliJ.
That's what I thought, yes. IntelliJ is a real good editor, and I don't think that the other options compared to what you're doing. I think finally Visual Studio Code competes with what you're offering. I won't claim it beats it, but it's about time.
I mean, it's the difference between a code editor and an IDE, really,
Yes.
You know, is the way I see it. I mean, because, you know, IntelliJ also has like all the Docker stuff built in, all the Git stuff built in, all that stuff. You're adding pieces of those things with Visual Studio, but it's piecemeal. It's not all integrated.
Right. And it's more bring your own choice than it's an integrated package like IntelliJ is. So with that, what I want to do, let's see, I'm going to load up who here has seen CommandBox? It is a nice packager tool. Get this bigger for us. I have CommandBox installed in this system. And all you have to do is type in box. And of course, when you're doing a presentation with lots of video software running, it'll start just a little slower, but I'll show it to you here. So this is CommandBox. And in CommandBox, even though I'm running in PowerShell, they have aliases so that I used a Linux style command there. It has aliases, so as you're using CommandBox, it lets you run stuff pretty much any way you want. And they do the fun stuff. That's that 3D thing. If you stare at it, it'll produce a three-dimensional picture. It has plenty of help. These are all the standard features in the command. This is a command line interface, which we're all using more and more in development nowadays. And one of the fun parts about this is you see here that I have started these different servers over time. So all I did there was CommandBox list, and you can see here that I have these servers running. So if I take this, move it over to this side, make sure I've clicked in that window. So here's the command box running in the window. And another thing you will see, and all you do is when you're inside your code base, all you have to do is push type start and it'll spin this up. If you're in a Windows-based system, you can see these ones that I have. Well, this is my pre-app. I could open it also from here. I can get information about it. So there's a lot of good information there. You can go to the server. You can go to your code web root. So I like all of what that does. Now, how do we get the code to actually, how does this work inside a ColdBox? What I want to do is to walk you through understanding what this provides. But before I do that, I'm going to come over here. City. And this would be, is the type big enough?
I can see it.
Okay. So we'll do, no, we need to make dir first, cd first. Okay. So we're in this directory, there's absolutely nothing in it. So what we can do is, again, we'll look at our help. And you see we have all these functions and commands here, including ColdBox. Well, ColdBox help lets us see what we can do with ColdBox. One of the things we can do is reinit or watch or create. Well, it's the create's the one we're after. I want you to see this. You hit tab while you're in here, and it gives you these commands that you can move down through. So we're going to call this February. We'll create oh, there we go. No. And now also I really like this about command box is while it's working and creating this application, it's actually showing us where it's doing its work, and considering it's not a command line interface, that's pretty cool. So you see it's created all of this little application here. Now, if you just start with a expression mark, it'll pass this out to the standard terminal. So here's this application it just created. And once you get to this point, I'll pull this over to the side here, and we'll increase the font size. Whoop. There we go. Okay, so what you see is handlers and a main CFC. You see some layouts in a main CFC, and you say views folder with a main folder. Inside your main CFC, not your layout, your handler, my bad. Notice this says index, and this file is index. Well, the reason for that I'll make this a little bigger so you can see this, is if we went main/index, you see nothing changed here. But if you went index 2, you're going to get an error. So by default, what they're doing is have you heard the term convention over configuration? They're using a convention that this is your actual handler and this is the method inside your handler. Or it represents your view folder and your view file inside there. So by doing that, this creates a very functional routing system without you having to program that in. Another thing here, see this error handling tool? I really like this tool. It's called Whoops, because you had an error, right? So let's see. Service controller. Basically, we'll come back to this because I do want to show you how that works. But hang it, I want to bring it there. We'll start here. Aha, it doesn't want to swap on me. Oh, that's why. This is what I wanted. Now I can overlap and swap back and forth. So you see here this welcome message. How do we put this in a paragraph? So it says we're looking at the view files. Am I in the right one? And that's not updating because I did not start the thing. Nobody. Okay, so we could start box in here. I'm just going to go ahead and change that just to show you. But
John, switch back to the slides again.
oh, did it?
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me know. The code screen. There we go. Okay, so let me flip back. So this is how we started our application. But inside of VS Code, you can also call this up here and start box. So with that starting, I'm going to go back here. Because what I want to do is show you what I was talking about. So this is start, and what it'll do is if you don't have a copy, you could start this in either Lucy or Adobe. You can set your server up so it'll run in that version. But what it's doing right now with this freshly generated code, it's going in and starting a new server. So I'm going to have 4 ColdFusion servers running in my system, but I've overloaded this machine with memory, so that won't be a problem. Yep, you see it right here. And this is the 4th one. You see we have the same information. Oh, that didn't look like it. Let's see, CD wire first. Yes, here it is. So that's the one that just started. And you see, we're looking at these files. So that's basically in the Coldbox, the way we do this. Let's see. But we know that's nested inside a layout because we saw that. So what if inside of our layout,
It switched back to the slide skin.
well, I don't know why that keeps swapping on me. Yes, I will. Yep, just warn me. Thank you. Well, I know what's swapping. I just have to set my keys up later to prevent that. So, well, so we come over here, we refresh, and you can see this layout is now wrapping the view. So if you went up inside your handler here, remember earlier it broke when I did index 2? Well, we're going to go ahead and create index 2. And we're going to have it, there it goes. It's going to do that every time I hit save because that's when it's doing it. Sorry about that, guys. Just a second here. I'm going to see if I can stream audio hotkeys. I'm going to try and take. Okay, now let's see if this works. Hey, no, it's not swapping. Okay, I fixed my macro. So now we have index 2, but it's pointing to a file called show me. So in here we will so it says index 2 isn't working. Well, there's a reason for that. Now I am doing something wrong. So I have the right app, B72, test main, index 2. It's going to show me. I like this about this tool also. Main, show me, index 2. First, speaking of which, let me do this. But it's not hitting that at all.
I think we have a typo there on line 16.
Yeah, I put that in to create an error.
Gotcha.
Because that tells me that it is not hitting index 2. So I'm on my main. Just make sure I'm in the right code base. Aha, 372. So what I need to do, come in here. Okay, 372. So we're in the right code base. Well, isn't this what happens during a demo? This worked while I was practicing. Okay. This is first. Uploaded that window. We got these. Well, good. I'm going to restart it. Maybe I do have too much running. Good. You know what? It was after I added this.
John, it's supposed to slide again.
Did it? I really thought I blocked that. Okay, so show me. This is the main. It's all that stuff. First. You know what? Now you notice first is not in this list. In just a second, you'll see it start up here. I thought I had done that. Okay. So this is the correct UI address. And when I restarted it, I did not. That was my fault because I restarted it in 2 command lines and one of them overwrote the other. So this one, we expect something to go wrong because as we said, Okay. So what this should do is go to this main CFC handler. I'm going to rename that to show. Get my doc look right. And we have our show me, so that should still exist. Yes, it does. And we won't need that at all. When you add stuff, sometimes just to make sure it sees it, you'll do a reinit, especially when you're creating new objects and things for data components. Main without index, we'll see main. Event handler is not a registered. Well, you know what? I am going to jump to the other one. I did not use the simple framework before this point, so I'm not sure if there's an issue with that or not. I'm going to jump over here. And this is the one that I had pre-created. And I'm going to close that one out. Model, handlers, main. And you see this one has a lot more pieces in it, which is why I was going for the simple one. But we go with show. So I guess that template is a template I'm going to have to report us that it has some bugs or I did something wrong. If this is the template I typically use, but you see main show worked. And what we'll do now is we'll come down to the main folder, create a new file. Because of course that's going to work, right? So what it do is on the URL, we're going to main, except now we're going to add show instead of okay. So main show and show me, because we're telling it to use this view. And there we go. So now it's working. I'm sorry, that's what I did different. I used that simple template, and apparently that one has an issue with it. This is the one that most people use if they're going right to a page. Now in here, I have also created another handler called meetings. And in meetings, I have 3 items. And you see what I have is set my view to meetings 1 is the same way. And my route will be meetings 1. And there we go. And see here, group topics. Well, does anybody know where group topics came from? Well, if you look at the top, what we have here is this property called group topics. And we told it to inject topics. Well, if you look over here in my models, you'll see I have a file called topics. And I have a number of methods on here. Active is the one that I'm using here. Let me pull that over further so it's easier to see. So here active is, and it has a list of 3 different items. And what we did, that's our models, meetings, get back where we were. Okay, so our handlers, meetings, we have 3 methods. So instead of saying main index or main show, now the URL would have meeting /1, 2, or 3 because these are the 3 routes that it can go to. And you see what we're doing here is using this topics. And at the top of the file here, it's pulling in this topics library and it's giving it a name of group topics. So we say group topics, and we call the active method, and it returns this information. And what we do is we stuff that into a PRC. The reason for that is inside, see meetings 1, we're going to serialize that data so it'll spit out properly on a page. And we have PRC topics. And when we do that, it spits it out like this. Now, if you want information that you sent in from a URL to be included in this, well, that's an RC. So well, I might want to do this, right? Now that appears to have no effect, but we will go back in here and we'll say prc.myvar equals rc.mark. And then over here, after this list, we will say rc myvar. And you see, there it is, time. So you see that as we update the URL, that's being passed right in. Now what's neat is with ColdBox, if you're calling this page via a post, if you're calling it basically any method you call the page with, it's going to pass those through. And there are ways that you can also, if you dig further into it, what we have over here is a router. This router by default, what we were talking about, see this handler action? So if we wanted to target this very specifically, so what is our route? It is meetings. Our action would be 1, and we'll create a variable called other. We'll make that the other when we pass it through. You know what? No one said anything. You're watching me. I'm going to mess it up, aren't I? Now you notice this time, other doesn't exist. So I told you I was going to come back to this. I click here, click open. And look, it brought me right to the line where it said other doesn't exist. Well, that's because there is no default for other, which we all know we can do in ColdFusion code. But the problem is right here. I needed to put meetings, one, redfish. So it looks like nothing's happening there. So what we do is I want to show you this. Right, dump, B. So we have redfish, so we know it's being passed through. What did I? Okay, so it's being passed through event, redfish. Can you see it? Oh, it disappeared, didn't it? There we go. So now we have other redfish. And that's because you need to pair them up. So what that does is other equals redfish. It sort of spaces them. And I am going to fix this now. The other, where's my board? Move those out. And that's how redfish. I was hoping that it was going to show you that error because I wanted to show you the same way. Again, that's not working. And that took us all the way over to here where our problem is. So we knew the other didn't get passed through. If it didn't get passed through, well, of course, the odds are that it's here. And I like the fact that that whoops is part of Coldbox because then I can find my errors a little easier. So, excuse me. So now we see how handlers work. And you see we have two. Well, we've got group topics, and we can cast these to HTML. So let's go look at what group topics is. I'm gonna shrink these all down. We want our models, pull our topics up here. So what we see is we've got this group topics. And what I actually did is, see these modules here? I used this library called CB Markdown. And I pulled that library by, there's a couple of ways you could do it. Server box JSON. You will see here in my scripts, I have CB Markdown. And all I did at the box line was typed install space CB Markdown. It pulled it, stuck it in here with a package, and it made this part of it. And yes, sometimes you have to re-init when you do those. So I did that and added it in here. And by doing that, I have this module. So I'm pulling this. Notice I'm just making 2 copies of this. The first copy I'm using just PRC raw. And the second one is Markdown based. I'm calling meetings 2. So it's this information here. And I will show you views, meetings 2. So here I'm using my PRC, my raw. And down here, I'm using PRC Markdown. But of course, the difference is what I did is used MD to HTML and then stuffed the same content into it. And this is where I got MD, because that extra library I added in here lets me process my text into Markdown. So we'll get rid of all of that. Go to meetings 2, and you see here's the Markdown version that's raw, and here's with it converted. Does that make sense? So to find out what's available like this, come over here to ForgeBox, and you see here's the Markdown libraries that people have created. And I mentioned earlier that, let's see, I'll go look at the newest things people have uploaded, and I told you there's a bunch of new CF Wheels stuff that just hit the repo. If you're doing one-time passwords for like SMS and stuff, this is a cool tool that someone's been working on. A SQL parser. So a JSON diff, which is a really cool tool. And there are 762 libraries on here. So while you may be able to build your own framework and your own tools, the odds are there's a lot of stuff that you're doing that someone else has already done. The concept of being able to take this CFC and import it like this and reuse it, that's called inversion of control. You may be familiar with that. This lets you pull that stuff in for reusing stuff. And if you notice, because it's in the models folder, and if it was in a nested directory, it would have worked just as well. It knew how to pull this in. And the models that I showed, modules I showed you, see CB Markdown, that knows it came from this folder. And if you look, this is using a bunch of Java libraries to accomplish this. So we're actually integrating Java stuff that people have written into our ColdFusion application. So it knew how to do this. has a Java loader in there, has emoji capabilities. So yeah, this is a nice, robust, and just like up here in your config, I showed you router. Well, when you do ColdBox confusion, there we go, that was confusion. When you do ColdBox configuration, that's what this file is. So you can customize stuff. If you wanted to rename your handlers to controllers because that's what you prefer to call them, you can do that and it will find the folder to your custom settings. When you have a module that pulls down and you build like this module config is the same thing. So that gives you how to pull those. So now you see how to use modules. Models, that could be, if you use the service gateway pattern, you can put those in the models directory. A lot of people do. If you're using a data element, you can put those in the models. If you're using ColdFusion ORM, you can put those in the models. I'm not going to show it tonight, but one of the cool things that Eric, who is a member of the Ortus team, has created is he didn't like the ColdFusion ORM. So what he did, there we go, is he created this library called Quick. And let's see, do we have issue tracker documentation? And just like most Ortus tools, a lot of these Ortus tools has a complete, really featured guide. And if you see a problem in these guides, you can do a pull request and upgrade the docs. So the books are actually open sourced. And here is a list of the different Ortus books that are out there. They have some extensions. These are mainly for Lucy. Command Box, that tool that I showed you about, I'll show you their docs. They have a content box CMS. If you want to do open API Swagger style docs, this is a good tool. CFconfig will let you pull settings out of your server and store them so you can restore them later. This is your docs for ColdBox. There's caching, logging. Wirebox is the tool that's also built into ColdBox. But if you're using Framework 1, you can use CacheBox, Logbox, Wirebox, TestBox. You can use these libraries. They're portable up inside of Framework 1 if you want. And these documentation things will show you how to use them. And you see here, they also have this neat fancy style of doc. So here's your ColdBox docs, your getting started guide, and plenty of information to get you on your way. And like I told you, it has these built in. So ForgeBox with Command Box works with that. And if you're using CF Wheels or Framework 1, speaking of which, let's go look. FW1. You can see Framework 1 is kept here too. So if you want to install a Framework 1 thing, you can either from the DOS prompt, without going into box, you can type box install Framework 1, or you can type box and let the command box prompt come up and then just type install Framework 1. It'll work either way. So, and you see they have a few different tools for working with that. So now, let me get back over to my slides. I've covered views, layouts, handlers, models, routes. And one thing to remember, if you're doing routes, Coldbox, or any tool, the route that comes first that matches it is the route that will take control. So if you ever have problems with your routes, make sure that you have them stacked in the right order. So, okay. What we see here is resources. CFCast, I did not show that, but CFCast is an online learning center. You can go to cfcast.com. You'll have access to that. The Ortis team does a lot of community help. They're on the Slack channel, and they also have their own Slack channel. They also have a, let's see, what is it? Yes, I will paste these in. They also have their own community website. And they have an annual conference. That'll be pasted in here in a moment. And they do not have the date set for this year yet. That was last year. And they've got the whole ForgeBox repo that works with the command line tools. So it works a lot like Node Package Manager if you want an example. They also do professional training. If they have classes they hold now and then, they do online shows. And as I showed, they've got the content box, they have Docker images, query builder. QB is a way to make your query interactions more elegant. CB Wire, I do want to show that to you. So I will show CB Wire to you in a minute. But the point I want to bring is all these tools and stuff they have, they've been developed and really enhanced. In fact, one of the things that you will see, let me swap the screens over here, go back to my code because I want to show you something. I'll show you the wires in a moment. If you open your Coldbox folder, you can tell which version you're running because this file is always easy to see. So that's which version of Coldbox I have installed. In your config, I'll just show you. So here's your standard Coldbox settings. And notice that reinit, it typed when I did the refresh framework reinit. You can change that so someone can't guess what your reinitialization key is. And it has default things that you can fill in. If it's not filled in, it uses the default. You see we have logbox here. You can modify and control that. But let's see, do we have? Stream, no, stream isn't. I don't see a configuration for streaming. One of the things that's been added into the core of ColdBox is the stream technology, and you can go and find all kinds of things on, if you want to get up inside how all this stuff works, you could go up inside here and search for anything you want. I'm going to come over here and go to the docs. Because what I want to do is show you what type of releases these guys have had. So ColdBox 6 was released within the last year. That's when they added this whoops feature in. And I'm going to get the correct name on this for you. CV Futures is, okay, so here we have ColdBox scheduled test. Who here has ever tried to use the ColdFusion scheduler and been less than a happy camper? Who here has heard of other tools and other platforms? Well, Java has already solved this. It isn't built into ColdFusion yet. It isn't built into Lucy yet. But Lewis and team, what they decided to do is to add this, and now we have a scheduler built in. So we have the ability to do scheduling. And let's see. I'm going to see where the test matchers, rendering. Is it? Okay, here it is. The task, ColdBox Futures. ColdBox Futures is basically, it's threading, but it's threading that works. So what they're doing here is they're executing all of these and telling them all to run at the same time, all of these items. And then after they're done, to use the logger and to log the results. And that's what their little examples are. So this one, we run this one, then this one, and then we run these two together, and then we run this one separately. I don't know if you've tried to do threading in ColdFusion before. This is so much better. So, and when you do this, these tasks can actually complete side by side so they don't have to wait for the other one. So, yeah, you should check this out. Like I said, there's logging enhancements. This is that whoops tool I told you about. So I wanted to show you that. And the other thing I wanted to show you was, let's see. Oh, I know how you did it. Okay, see this here, wired, count, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, this is CV Wire that's running this. And what I want to show you here, going to the network tab, we're going to clear this. So we refresh, and what we see is it pulls, let me move this up a little. So this short little thing, there's a lot of information there. I'll show you where that comes from. Pulls this LiveWire JavaScript file, and yeah, we don't care about that. So we see where all that is. So we can come over here. I'm gonna get rid of all of that. Close that. And what I did is in my handler, my meetings for number 3, I set the layout to wired this time. So if we go to layouts, wired, what we see we did is because I also, just like I did that other module for the markdown, I included CV wire by doing install CV wire. And that gives us this command, so it creates the wire styles, which gives us a little markup to make the wiring work. I told it that I wanted wire 3 and to stick the standard CV wire scripts in. Then what it does is it looks in the views wires folders for this 3. Now see here we have count CF output, count, and we're outputting the args counter. And we have a wire with a click event manager, and we're calling increment. So I will show you how that works, because down in wires, we put our CFCs. So I'll pull my counter over here on the side. And you see what we have is data counter equals 0. So that's where the args counter comes from. You have increment, and it's variables data counter plus equals 1. We're familiar with that if we do ColdFusion. That's just going to increment this. But what's strange about this, do you see any JavaScript in your code? Not a lick of JavaScript. Well, if there's no JavaScript, then what happens? So I'll click and see wires 3. What it did is it pulled back this JSON with the part of the page that needs to update. And that part of the page it needs to update, including the data values. See, counter now equals 1, right? Twice more. Come down here. Counter equals 3. So it's actually pulling back HTML and JSON data to update the page. So if you're doing pages that don't need the complexity of a full on view page, and I definitely love view. If you want to do view 3 talk, I would love to do a view 3 talk about what's changed and where they are, how Nuxt.js works. I love those tools, but a lot of times you just want to add something to a site that's simple. It's a one page, and yes, it's using JavaScript, but it's not that difficult. And what I want to show you is, let's see, there it is. Open. This is another application that's written using CV Wire. And see here, there was no JavaScript written to create this. If you go to the, let me show you, CFcast, browse, see here, this Grant Copley and CV Wire.
Hey everyone.
You can go right here to CFcast and come in here. You don't have to be a subscribed member to view this one. As you see, I am not logged in. And he builds this out in this one. So let's see, task. Submit bug for simple template to Ortis. Because that was rough. I didn't enjoy that. And let's see, attend. Well, that one I'm probably not going to do. Just going to remove it. So as you can see here, that's pretty functional. 3 tasks, 1 complete, deleted 1. And if you look at the app that created this, let's see if I've got this running. I believe I do. Hello World Task List. Here we go. So you see he has 2 wires, and the wires are nested. One's actually calling the other. So you can build complication, something that's not super simple as you go. So here's a task, and here's a task list. And what he did in this task list, input button. So here he has his input, wire, model, debounce. So you're like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I could remember or figure all that out. Well, that's not a big problem because go to Ortis Books. Oh, and by the way, they have rule box for business logic. They have a validation library. They have authorization stuff that does, there's that Swagger thing I was telling you about for doing your API docs. They have got so much here. Let's see. They don't have it listed yet, do they? Okay. Watch this. So CB Wire, the docs aren't complete yet, but it has documentation on there. And this example that I gave you came from right here. So with that, let me see, I need to swap to Prezo again. So why is Coldbox so popular? Because the companies who are using it, it's using the best practices that most other application languages are using, and it's working. They're getting business done. It's more sustainable. You'll learn testing, and if anyone is learning testing, learn to do test-driven development. If you test your code after you write your code, then you're actually going to be testing what you wrote, not what you wrote was supposed to perform, not the function it's performing. So if you're testing a method inside of an object, well, you have arguments that go in and you have data that comes out. And if you run your testing like that and you need to change anything inside your code, well, then your testing will still work, because that shouldn't change when you refactor your code. So we don't refactor a code because we don't do unit testing, not a good job of it, or we don't refactor it because we don't know if it's going to break the core functions. And if those core functions are working, that's still unit testing, but it's unit testing that works. So I also wanted to show you APIs. So just a second and I will queue those up. Let me close this one. And we'll close this one. Could have just used one of those. Oh, there we go. Okay. So we want No, I can't tell which one it is, so this is how I will get there. Watch this, you'll enjoy this. Server list. Okay, so that's the API. So server cd pre API moves to that folder. And it opened up in the other window. I'll pull it over here. So here's the same thing we saw in the other place. We still have all the same features. Yes, thank you. It was updated. So user service, those are the things we can call in there. But this one nests stuff different. So what I want you to see is the handlers here. See this echo? These are built in. When you're doing API, it has a lot of this stuff built in for you. So you can tell it, well, I only want index to receive post calls or get calls or delete calls. And you can see this was built in also. He's using the Java Web Tokens for logins. So when you use that template, a lot of this stuff is built in. And here's authorization. And you see he's injecting the user service. That's the wire box. And when someone registers, it takes this information. So all of this stuff is pre-built. So that's pretty nice that you can run the template for the API, advanced API, and have all this pre-run. So this was this one. So we see here, here's a JSON feedback coming. There we go. And if we want to change what's coming back, welcome to my CFUG meeting, RESTful service. So see, it was saying Coldbox, and the same thing. This is just like the other application, follows the same standards. Now you may think main index is going to work, but it isn't, and I want to show you why. You see, echo is the default. Well, here, echo dot index. So you see here's that router. So what we see is this is in the modules app version 1, because we tend to do that when we're building proper RESTful applications by the rules of the rule makers. You notice that post requests are sent here. So if you're doing login to a post request, it'll go here. And it is only going to take this as a post request. So this router gives you, but you notice the get by default goes to echo index. So that main index didn't work because they customized it here. But just told us this. And we also know that modern API v1. So when we put nothing in the URL, it's assuming this is API v1 in the default item. And you see that's what it's saying here. They put that into the config in the main Coldbox file. Notice this, all they do is they put this annotation on there and it locks this thing. So I'm going to write dump CGI is me. We'll just change this to there we go. Page offset messages, error false. Echo index. Oh, which is up here. I'm going to type who am I. We see that one worked. But we need to make sure we get it properly secured. In fact, invalid method. There we go. I don't have to show you because it already has it in here. See, this says invalid authentication. So you'd have to do a login, which I don't have set up because I'd have to, this is purely an API. And as I showed you, the login when it comes in, well, that login is coming in over a post request, and I can't send that out without setting up Postman or something. But I did want to get to the API quick to show you its features are there too. And yes, these are also covered in CFCast. They're covered in the docs. The docs are absolutely free. There's lots of online stuff about that. So now you've seen the multi-page application, the API. And the last thing I want to do is encourage you, take a look at Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code isn't the only thing to use, but it has some real neat features like live share. So if I'm stuck on code, I can call another developer who I have either work with or as a friend, and I can live share the code. He can see my code. I can share it so what's running in my browser will run in his browser across the internet to his Visual Studio Code off the same port. I can, and he can actually live edit my code with me at the same time. So with that, that's a pretty fantastic feature. So, and there is also the fact that there's Docker stuff also. They've done a lot of work. I think the best ColdFusion images out there right now are the ones that the Ortis team has put together. And they've done some tremendous work in that area. So I recommend Coldbox being done there, or use their containers to run your other CFML code that's not Coldbox related. So with that, that's what I had to share and talk about to you. So thanks for your time. Thanks for the patience while I worked through that bug earlier. And with that, questions and answers.
John, I really like what you did. I'm getting an echo.
You're getting an echo?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll turn my mic off when you guys talk.
Okay. One of the things that's currently missing from Taffy, but they're adding it when I'm not sure, is OAuth. But the CB wire is interesting to me, but I've reached a point where I know just enough Vue that I can do pretty much what I want to do most of the time. But I also a little perplexed, and I saw that Ray Camden said something on Twitter today. The jump from view 2 to view 3 is similar to the whole debacle of going from Angular 1 to Angular 2, where they lost me when they went to 2.
It is.
I don't know
But-
how far you can take CB Wire. I mean, it'd be nice to write ColdFusion and not write any JavaScript.
CB Wire is a takeoff on a Laravel project, Livewire.
Right.
It will never go as far as Vue's going. But when you're still doing what I call a multi-page application, where you have this page and this page and this page that are JavaScript Ajax oriented, it'll do that for you. If you want to have what we call a single page application, because the actual Vue code is loaded from a single URL, we should have called that SRAs, single route applications, because all those applications have lots of pages. So why do we call them single page? But ignoring that annoying fact, the SPA style apps, or if you're doing a, there you go, what do we call them? When you do a manifest, progressive web app is a fancy single page application. Use a manifest, use a service worker that runs in the background instead of actually in that browser tab, which lets you do things like push notifications to the browser even when the tab is shut. So, and other things like that. And there's extra browser features that are enabled when you're doing a progressive web app that are not normally enabled. The user still has to say yes before any of them trigger, but they can take that app, download it to their desktop, and use it offline, fully functional, if you write it correctly. So
Right. Now, I'm just looking at like being able to do CRUD, and I've got like in Vue, you can do CRUD and talk to an API. Then after you're done, if it's successful, you get a pop-up message that eventually goes away. Says transaction successful or recent error.
well, code reuse is a big thing. What happened is when they pushed to Vue 3, they did it for all the right reasons. But the jump was bigger than they understood because they were in it day by day. They didn't see how much of a jump it was. I will tell you that Vue 3 is worth it, worth it, worth it. We have these things we do, some people in Vue 3 called mix-ins, because we have code that really should be used across the thing, but there wasn't a real good way to do it. That's what Compose does. But Compose thinks different. In fact, it has this funny little habit. Let's see, where's my...
The point I'm trying to get to is CB Wire is not a do-all. It's just like it looks cool, but it's kind of a limited little utility. It isn't the Holy Grail.
Ah, there we go. I don't know if I have one of these that shows it or not. What are these? User, what is it? No, I may not have one on this. But one of the things you will see them doing, script, setup. And in Vue, where you're normally doing this fancy data thing or so on, you basically do, your constant and your variable name. And down here, you do an export of everything you want to export, your functions and your data items. That's it. You're not doing the old complex. And I know it sounds funny to call it complex, but when you do setup, it makes script smart and you don't have to do any of that stuff anymore. So they've turned the Compose is the way that you share stuff across files. and they have a new thing called Pina. Have you ever done Vuex?
Vuex?
Yes, it's like the React's Redux way of taking your data
Oh, no, I haven't.
state. Pina makes it easy. And
Does-
Pina will be replacing
Wire
Vuex.
Is CD wires for people that don't want to learn JavaScript?
Yes.
And
Don't want to learn JavaScript.
it's not full featured enough.
Right. It's very featured, but it's not ultimately featured. And CB Wire, if you have an existing site and you want to Ajax a page without having to go and learn jQuery and update this and that, it wires right in.
Another thing and I guess we're getting off topic here. I'm sorry, but
That's
with
fine.
Vue, a lot of the focus of the docs was that without having a full-blown program, you could just layer Vue in to an existing program and do things. And Vue 3, I guess that goes away.
See this up here? That's as of yesterday. Because Vue 3 was harder and they didn't to transition to, they hadn't thought of several things. That's why that was delayed until yesterday, even though it's been out for about a year. But now they have docs and examples and support, different people supporting it. Are you familiar with Quasar?
Yeah.
Quasar is written on Vue 3. Nuxt is being converted to Vue 3. Vue 3, in fact, have you ever heard of this company called Ionic?
Yep.
They used to be Angular only, not Angular 1, but they were Angular only. And when they converted, they did Vue also. And they are very big fans of Vue because they say Vue thinks more like Ionic thinks.
Okay.
So you can now program Ionic in Vue. And that's for about a year now.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'm curious
guess
about
what?
CP wire. That's all. We're getting off topic because
Yeah, which is fine.
I want to talk about ColdBox,
But they're using Vue 3 also. And Vue 3 has one other big advantage. It uses TypeScript. TypeScript makes your code hinting inside your IDE heavenly. You're getting code hinting. You can control click on something. It'll go to the source. It just works. And TypeScript helps you find all kinds of things before you try and push it to the package solution or to the browser. So less errors. Who doesn't like that?
well, I guess if I get into Vue 3, I know who I can ask questions from. But does anybody else have any questions like on ColdBox?
Nothing here. Oh, it looks like there's a question in the chat.
Somebody with a good name is typing.
Okay, he's got a question.
Are there a lot of similarities between the three major frameworks? There's always trade-offs. That's completely true. Basically, when using framework one, you get to framework one is like having a airboat on the Everglades, that big fan. You can go just about anywhere you want, sometimes even jump over land masses that are small, because there are no rules in framework one. There's just a basic structure that's solid. It's performing, it gives you the backbone. But you don't have all those other tools except for some of the tools like Wirebox or Logbox that you could add in. So if you're going to use framework one, I would even look at the Ortus tools just for those reasons, because that can really enhance what you're doing. But other than that, if you want to use stuff like CB Futures so that there we go. Your threading in CFML is something that you enjoy doing instead of your troubleshooting? Well, that's where ColdBox 6 comes in, because they've got stuff that isn't even offered or built in yet by Lucy or by Adobe. So some pretty cool stuff in that thing. And if you email me, John, I will put it up here. You know what? I'm typing to nowhere. I thought I was in there. I can talk with you more specifically about your use case. Be glad to do that. Because like I say, I definitely like Vue. I've spent lots of time on it, but I can still see several applications, even though I would use Vue more often, where I would choose CB Wire.
John's responding.
And I see Randy made it. Hello, Randy. You slipped in on us.
Hey, John. Sorry I was late. I mean, I use a command box now with, what is it, CFconfig, but seeing the whole like ColdBox like universe, that's kind of cool. It's a lot of stuff in there.
They're putting stuff in there like that markup. You know, if I wanted to do markup, I can add it in. And without ColdBox, it's not quite as easy to add something like that in. So, unless you're just one of those resident geniuses that wonders, huh, you guys will like this. Where I'm, my day job, where we're working, guy left and went on to something else, but I worked with him for a little over 2 years. Won't give his name. But we were always noting that this guy was really smart. And when he left, a couple of us went to LinkedIn and checked what his background was. He took nuclear physics. And his buddy decided to program, and his first language was ColdFusion. How appropriate.
Right. If there's not any other questions, we'll stop the recording.
Who can guess this was